Today I'm going to be remaking the first prop I ever made, which is this. This is a Hylian Sheild from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. It is specifically an Ocarina of Time one because that's what I made it to. Now, this original one was made with foam core, and which I bent then paper mache'd. This time I'm going to be using EVA Foam and lots of paint. First thing you have to do is get your block of EVA Foam, and hopefully it's big enough to fit a shield on, which in this case it fortunately is. Now for this bit I'm just going to cheat and use my old shield, but what you need to do is to draw the shape of the shield you want on using whatever measurements you've determined to be correct. Now the way of doing measurements, you get the in-game model, which the easiest way to do is just play the game, get the character to hold whatever item you want and take a picture of the screen, or a screenshot, or capture it, or whatever way you do it. Then you get that up on the screen and you can do measurements of the shield, and as long as you have something that is scalable to you, so in most cases when I do swords I'll use the forearm because I can just use a measuring tape on my forearm to give it an approximate size of what this would be if I was holding it, or it'd be about this big. I mean, the actual thing's about that big. So then, right, once you've decided on the size, you mark it onto the foam. In this case I'm going to be using chalk, as I do with most of my projects, because chalk really works well. So just draw around it. Now because of the curves in this shield, I'm actually going to have to, adapt a little bit with the shape and make it a little bit bigger, because it's going to need to be a little bit wider to accommodate the curl outwards. But once you've drawn around it, you end up with a shape like that, which that is undeniably a shield. Now, again, I'm just going to add like a little bit around the side. Like such. That little bit, when I curl it up, should hopefully be enough for that. Now I'm going to cut this out, and then I'm going to get this. I'll mark it onto a second sheet to cut the outer detailing, because this section here is raised. So I'm just going to mark this out, then mark this bit inside and cut that out, and then that bit gets stuck on. Now I've marked all of the layers out on this, or I've marked the layer out on this. I put a line down the centre just to try to make it more symmetrical, and this is the first one I cut out. When cutting out EVA foam, it's important to use a sharp knife. If you don't, it tends to tear the edges, not cut straight. So basically the raised detail, which is these sections here, stop that. Okay, these sections here, which are going to be raised up, I've transferred onto this. I'm going to cut out and then adhere to this once I've curved it. And okay, to curve this, I'm going to be using a hot air gun, and you expose EVA foam to heat, get it a bit warm, and when you bend it, it'll hold that shape. And that's the best way of forming this stuff, and I am probably going to get a better bend than that in the end. But to be fair, bending foam core is actually really difficult, so that's quite an achievement. So the next steps are to bend this, cut that out, cut this out, and then bend this and put it onto there. I may put a third layer on top of there as well, because that diamond, or this section here, is supposed to stand out, but I'll decide that more towards the end. I stuck the outside on, as I said, and then stuck the little diamond up on top, as you can see there. and over there. Okay, now I've got a little section by there that isn't stuck down properly, and a little bit by there that I'm going to have to go back over. But after that, I used a electric sander on the outside and just gave it a bit of a curve and straightened the edge off. Now at the end I'm going to have to brush it all down to get all the dust off, but I did it with an extractor on it, so most of the dust went. Then on the inside I used a, what's it called? This thing on my drama. It's actually a rotary tool because it's a generic one, but I then went around the inside and just curled it off a bit so it's not 90 degrees, so it looks nicer as a shield. And then I just beveled the inside a little bit just to give it a curved edge. I'm going to be leaving this diamond texturing on the back, but if you want to take it off, you have to at the first stage just grind it, just sand it all off. It takes ages and nobody really sees that side because you're going to be looking at it like that. If you've seen that side, there is something wrong. Okay, right. So now that I've done that, I've got the detailing on the front to do. So I'm going to cut a Triforce out of the EVA Foam, which is just 3 triangles the same size, and stick them on. Then after that, I'm going to do the crest of the Hyrule royal family. But I'm going to do that in craft foam, hopefully, so it just sticks up a little bit off the surface. And then once I've done that, I'm going to be doing these little bits on the side here. They're going to be done with filigree, so I'm going to cut triangles out of the EVA foam and then stick them on in the pattern. I've made 3 triangles. I've tried to keep them all the same size, like that. And once I'd cut the 3 of them, I then beveled the edges with scissors, just cutting the edge off so they weren't like at 90 degrees, all apart from in the centre of the 3 triangles, because contrast, I guess. And I'm just going to hot glue them on. Don't worry about squeezing it flat at this point. You can always rebend it if you mess it up too much, but you realistically just want it to stick properly. And you're going to have to rebend these on the surface anyway, so yeah. Just now got our little Triforce, and now I have to design the crest of the royal family, which fortunately I have this space here, which is the outcut from the offcut from the centre, like that. So it came out. Well, I'm going to trace this onto a bit of craft. It'll just make it easier for getting it the right size, because I've decided it's going between there and there. Actually no, it's between that section it's going in. And this gives me a definite size on what it is. And it's a lot quicker than messing around. The upside of working in a prop shop, you get a lot of foam sitting around ready for use. The downside, you have to buy all the foam. I have now transferred the eagle, if any camera can see it. Okay, I've now transferred it onto here, You may not be able to see it, but it's now on there. If you can't see it, you're just going to have to trust me. So now I'm just going to cut this out and stick it onto here where it's meant to go. Now at this point, I've just stuck it on lightly, like that, and now I'm just going to glue it on. That's just hot glue again. I've now stuck this section on, or stuck the crest on, and the Triforce. As you can see, it's getting to look a lot more like a shield now. Over there, got the chest, I've got the crest, and I have the Triforce stuck on. And I just have to do these bits of detailing up in the corners, and that's it. Right, for the detail in the corners, I'm going to be basically using a filigree, which is the name I've heard most commonly referred to as. But to make this stuff, you just get a straight edge, get your straight edge, put it up against the edge of the material, and cuts the material at a 45-degree angle. Now your first cut is going to be wasted because you're setting up the angle for later. Like that. Then you flip it over and do the same again at 45 degrees for the second one as well. The exact angle doesn't matter, but a 45-degree triangle just makes a nice piece, that's all. Then you do it again. And don't forget to cut it loose. So now you end up with a strip like this, which is a triangular piece, and it pretty much remains the same size all over. And this stuff is really flexible, and you can make shapes out of it, cut it, and it just looks really nice in comparison to, you know, cutting out big blocks. So I'm just going to draw the shape on there, and then stick this in, and then cut the edges to make it blend out, as you'd expect, and that should be it. Now I put a little handle on the back of the shield, just hold it by. It's still drying, so I wouldn't advise holding it on it for long. But now that I'm done, okay, you're quite done. Okay, so now that I'm done with all that, I've sealed down this section as well and stuck everything that needs to be. Now I'm going to go around the edges where there are little gaps, like around here, in there, little gaps, where the foam just hasn't stuck together entirely. And I'm going to fill it with just bathroom sealer. Now this stuff contains fungicides and the like, so I would advise, if you're going to use it, to wear gloves. I only have one glove left because I imagine I wrecked all the others. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to rub it into all of the cracks. It's going to look awful, but just try to be careful, don't use a load of it. And just rub a little bit on the edges just to finish off the curves as well and fill in the cracks. And once you've done that, it should be, well, once I've done that, it should be ready for painting. But this stuff takes 24 hours to dry. So now I've let the filler on this dry overnight. and it's got a 24-hour dry time, so it's not going to be quick. Now I'm going to be using sandpaper on this just to remove the big lumps and stuff like that where the filler was. I've already done the outside a little bit, but it's going to get a little bit more sanding, and then I'm going to paint. Okay, I've now sanded this back. I know it barely looks any different, but this is now relatively smooth. And then once I did that, I then heat treated the surface. And heat sealing is you just get a hot air gun and run it across the surface, which should seal the surface of the EVA foam. It's the cheapest way to seal EVA foam, but it's also the worst way to seal EVA foam. But this isn't going to a convention. It's at the best it's going to be a wall hanger, so I'm not that bothered about, you know, the quality of the finish at the end. But if you want to do it properly, you can use Plasti Dip, or you can use layers of PVA glue or Mod Podge, or there's a load of different ways to do it. But if you just paint straight onto EVA without anything, the foam itself absorbs some of the paint and it doesn't look as good. But when I did that, it also lost its shape, so I had to rebend it. Which is why it may be slightly more curved now than it was before, because I've gone back and corrected that. Now I'm going to try to paint this. I'm going to be doing it with an airbrush. I've never used an airbrush before, so this could be a disaster. I've now painted the shield. It's actually done. Now what I was planning to do was airbrush the whole thing, and that was taking way too long, and it was going on so thinly that you could see the lines of sealant around the edges, and it didn't look that good. So basically I decided I need to put it on thicker, so I tried using a spray bottle with the same amount of thinning on the paint. It didn't end well, it just splattered the whole thing. It was an absolute disaster. So I had to wait for that to dry, and then after I did that, I primed it. I primed it with all grey, as you can see on the back, and then I just painted over the front with silver. I did that with a brush because I was too lazy to airbrush it all properly. I then added, once I'd done all the silver, which I did everything including underneath all the colours as well, then once I'd done that, I waited for it to dry, which took an age, to be honest. This took about 4 days worth of painting because of the disasters. Then I just painted blue across there. That's 2 coats of blue on there, and it's come out quite nicely, but you can see where it's, well, actually the cameras aren't picking it up that much, but you can see, at least looking at it, all the brush strokes and stuff, because that's just how it is. But because the paint's so thin, you can see the brush strokes, but you also get the shine coming through from the silver underneath, so it does actually look quite cool. After that I just did red across the crest, and that's just gold paint that I did on the Triforce, and everything on here is just acrylic paint, apart from the primer, which was just primer I had left over from previous work. To be honest, I actually quite like this one. It's come out really well. I mean, well, yeah, freaking awesome. Okay, and right. So again, I don't do this that often, but I occasionally do it on my Facebook and Instagram to show the difference over a few years of practice. But this is my first one that I made 3 years ago. It's not that good of a curve on it, and I've literally just paper mache'd over foam core. You can barely tell where any of the detail is. It literally is just because I painted it, and if you rub your finger on it you can just about feel there's a little bit of detail on the Triforce and a little bit of detail on the crest. But this one actually looks like a proper shield, and I mean, side by side, I mean, those two, it's a huge difference. So, right, okay. Good luck if you're going to try to make any props. It's always a bit of fun. And I didn't actually give measurements this time, so I'll say it's 53 centimeters across the top and 63 long, so just slightly rectangular. Okay, and there you go. Okay. Right. Okay. I've let what the? That's not right. That's my second camera. Now, who put that there? Gas company.